Welcome to Healing Whole, the podcast. I'm your host, Callie. I'm a certified personal trainer and fitness instructor. I also happen to be extremely passionate about holistic living. With close to 10 years of experience, I've worked with clients from all walks of life. I also know a healthy and holistic lifestyle can be a little overwhelming. I'm here to break it down for you and take you on my journey to healing whole. Remember, the materials and content within this podcast are intended as general information only and are not to be considered a substitute for medical advice or treatment. And welcome to episode 4 of Healing Whole, the podcast. Today I am talking with Bailey Zembower Borrow. She is a therapist, a yoga instructor, and a wellness consultant in the Pittsburgh area. So we're going to be talking today about her style of therapy, yoga, and how that plays a part in her life, and then also her diagnosis that she survives every day. So how are you doing today, Bailey?
I'm good. Thank you for having me, Callie.
Thank you for being here with me. So the first thing I kind of want to ask is, how did you get into this holistic lifestyle? Has it always been a part of your life, or is this something that you kind of developed as you got older?
So I got into a holistic lifestyle without really realizing it. When I was younger, so about 5 or 6, this is the early 90s, I went vegetarian. So I've been vegetarian for over 25 years now, which is kind of crazy. Well, no, sorry, let me do math again. Almost 25 years.
Close enough.
We'll go with that. Yeah, close enough. So I started off so as a 5-year-old, I had never had seafood in my life.
Oh, okay.
So I just have never ever tried seafood. So things like that, like the reason I went vegetarian at first was because my dad was a pescatarian, so he still ate fish, and I thought it was really cool that you didn't have to eat meat. I was one of those kids that always wanted to be different, so I'm sure that also played a part in it. But that was pretty much my first holistic move, and then as I got deeper into my knowing what's in my food and knowing the products, of a very comprehensive list that I found of what animals are and what they're commonly found in. Point to memorize that list, and I will not use any. That was kind of my first experience with paying attention, being mindful about what you eat, was by and then went on to learn about organic and the perks of eating organic and different ways to obtain organic food. And at that point, you could really only get it. Luckily, we had Wegmans, which, if anyone doesn't know what Wegmans is, it is the epitome of all grocery stores. It's amazing. But so luckily, we had access pretty early on to organic produce where I was living at the time. I'm from Erie, and so I started kind of exploring that. I also started exploring, when I was between the ages of 9 and 12, I started getting really involved in animal rights activism.
That's awesome.
And yeah. So one of the things I learned about was the hormones that were being put in meat and how chickens were being treated to get eggs.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, I stopped drinking dairy milk because at that point in the 90s, they didn't make hormone-free options. And it was kind of the same for eggs. So I wasn't vegan. I just wasn't eating, scrambled eggs and drinking milk. But I would still eat, cookies that were made with milk and eggs, that kind of thing. Nowadays, I only eat really dairy that's cultured, because that's just feels better for my gut. But so I guess long story short, I think vegetarianism was kind of my gateway into the holistic lifestyle. Because when I guess moving on from that, would probably be. I know we'll get into this more later, but my next step when I was 13, my mom signed me up for a teen yoga class.
Oh, cool.
And she did that because I had been coping with some mental health issues, and she was willing to try anything to, help me feel better. And I attended my first yoga class, and I had never felt more grounded and more centered in my life.
And you were 13?
It was, when I was 13. Yep.
Nice.
And I honestly still hold on to that feeling anytime I feel like I've progressed in my my practice. And a lot of that too, which I'm sure we'll get into as well, is progressing in a home practice, which I think is very important for all yogis and yoga teachers.
To have your own practice. I think that happens a lot, that, even for me as a fitness instructor, that you neglect yourself almost. And it's important for you to have your own practice, whether it be yoga or fitness or anything, but sometimes it's almost like you're so focused on instructing other people that you forget about yourself.
Yeah, the running joke in the yoga community is the second you become a teacher, you can't attend any classes.
Yeah.
So, it's not a joke, it's reality,
Yeah.
But I think making sure, so I always, with my wellness clients, I always discuss bringing yoga into your life by trying 3 poses a day.
Oh, that's nice.
So that could be as simple as waking up, doing a side stretch, a forward fold, and a wide-legged forward fold. You don't have to try very hard. You just have to put some intention into it. So as, you do those 3 poses for a couple breaths each, just set the intention you want to set for the day.
Okay, so they're just implementing a little bit at a time, so it's not overwhelming.
Yeah. It's not meant to be overwhelming, because any big change kind of has to happen in baby steps. If you're at a point where, usually when I see my wellness consultation clients, they're at a point where they're so overwhelmed and so stressed that this is kind of their last resort kind of thing. They don't know what else to try. And so a lot of times they're guarded and closed off to a lot of suggestions, or they'll say, I tried that already. And you kind of have to approach it in a creative way. Like, well, did you try it this way? What was it like? How did it feel in your body when you tried it? Exploring it that way. But when it comes to the wellness consultation clients, and definitely for also my therapy clients, not overwhelming them is huge. Just giving little baby steps that, you can tangibly make. Write down 3 things you're grateful for. Try 3 yoga poses. Yeah. Take 5 deep breaths. Something that's measurable. And I think that you know that as well as I do about SMART goals, and making that measurable and realistic and attainable.
I think what you said was key, that usually people, when they seek out help, it's because they're at the end of their ropes. It's not usually when it's just kind of starting to get a little overwhelming, or they're a little unhealthy. It's usually like they're at the end of their ropes. There's something that's wrong, either health-wise or emotionally or physically. And that's when they take the leap. So I think having those small goals, because they're, it's just can be so, you're already so overwhelmed with what's going on with your health anyway. So to not have even more overwhelmingness with how you're trying to fix it, I think is the perfect way to approach it.
Yeah, I think baby steps are really important, and it's really important to acknowledge that. Another thing that I find is that when people do finally seek out help, they're not aware, they don't have a strong mind-body connection generally. I'm not speaking for all of my, but generally, once they get to a point of seeking help, you can tell mind-body disconnect, because there's quite a good chance that your body has been throwing up red flags, even if it's an emotional problem, or that your mind has been throwing up red flags the whole time, but maybe you need someone else's help to see what those red flags are, so that you can start to pay attention to that and head things off before you get to that overwhelmed point. And I think that's where a therapist or a wellness consultant can come in and really be helpful with navigating and facilitating those adjustments.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what drew you to therapy?
So I was drawn to therapy by my own diagnosis.
Okay.
I am, excuse me, I am diagnosed with bipolar 1 rapid cycling, panic disorder, PTSD, and OCD. Okay. And I know that's a lot, and you don't want to, as a therapist, I like to practice from the wellness model as opposed to the disease model.
Yeah.
So the disease model tells you that, you diagnose, you label, and it's really, diagnoses are really only for billing reasons and to give you a framework of where to go from here and what symptoms to treat.
So you don't define yourself by your diagnosis?
No, I did for a really long time. I did, and I had a turn in my treatment this past December, which I can talk about too, where I just kind of realized that I am more than this. I am more than bipolar. I am more than trauma. I am more than anxiety. But I didn't, it took me, I've been in treatment since I was 13 too, and it's taken me, 15 or more years to get to a point where I don't find myself by my diagnosis.
I think that's so hard, like people with anxiety, even me, I will say, well, I have anxiety, or I get panic attacks as well. So I'll say, well, I have this, and almost kind of do define myself by that diagnosis. It is a part of me, but I think I make it too much of a part of me. Like, I'm not defined by that. I'm in control of that, as opposed to it being in control of me.
Right. And sometimes it feels like it's in control of you. And those are the times where, you need to pay attention to those red flags and reach out for help.
That's huge. Help is so big.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Help and support, and having that strong support system. I mean, some therapists will tell you that having a strong support system is one of the number one predictors of success. I think that has a lot of truth to it, because, if you don't have support in what you're doing in your mental health recovery or in your substance abuse recovery, then who's going to hold you accountable for coping? Who's going to, be there to talk to you when you're having, disturbing thoughts at midnight, Yeah. So it's valuable. It's actually invaluable to have a strong support system.
I would never have gotten better if I didn't reach out, because I went into the hospital on Thanksgiving Day of last year, and I had kind of mentioned it to my parents, but I don't think I think I had said I wanted to die, or not that that's taken lightly, but it wasn't to the extreme effect of, like, I am genuinely thinking about killing myself.
Right.
And on, and that had been maybe 2 years prior that I even said anything to them. But that was the first time. I was 26, and that was the first time I had ever said anything. But on Thanksgiving Day, I text my mom because I was still too embarrassed to even call and ask for help. And my mother was in Florida, and I was too embarrassed to call my cousin and tell her to come get me and my daughter. And I said, you need to call so-and-so because I can't do this anymore. And that was the first time I really was like, I reached out for help because I just had no other choice. I would never have gotten better if I hadn't done that and if I hadn't told people how I really was feeling, because it was like nobody really knew. No, they don't know unless you tell them.
Yeah, because you become, an actor.
Yes.
You learn how to turn out a flawless performance so that no one can see how you're truly hurting. But I have to commend you too for A, seeking help, but B, going, you're in most of your life thus far without the need for, like specific treatment or like medication. You were able to manage things on your own for a really long time.
Well, that's what when I was go ahead, sorry. Say what you were saying again, Bailey. Sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say I just have to commend you for that.
Oh, thank you. I had spoken to doctors before and said that I think I'm bipolar, but it just kind of never came to anything, and I was never medicated properly. And in the hospital, they just said I'm so high functioning, it's hard to see. So it was hard to be able to tell because I was high functioning. And that, I think that makes it even harder for other people to understand, because I am so high functioning that it's hard for people to see that I am sick. Like, I really am sick. I'm not just saying I'm sick, because trust me, I don't want to be sick. I don't want to have thoughts of like killing myself or anything like that. But it just, I just learned to cope with a lot of therapy, but I learned to cope.
I can relate so hard because two separate times from two separate jobs, I had to take FMLA for mental health reasons. The first time it was due to panic disorder, and I went into a partial program for 3 months. And then thank you. The second time I took FMLA for my job and ended up also taking short-term disability. And, finally I ended up resigning from both jobs just because I felt that I couldn't keep up with the workload. But the second time I took FMLA, it was, because I was in a manic episode. I was experiencing paranoia and psychosis, and I drove myself 2 hours up to a hospital in Erie, and they admitted me, and then I was in a partial program for 6 months, actually, that really just, made a difference for me for a good period of time. And then, if you don't mind me sharing about my experience in December.
No, go ahead.
So, this is actually coming to, this is a hot topic right now, so I'm sure you've heard a bit about it, but the drug ketamine, which is an anesthetic drug, if you've ever had a colonoscopy or been put in a twilight sleep, chances are you've had ketamine and might not realize it.
Mm-hmm.
But so ketamine has shown to be extremely effective in treating resistant depression, especially suicidal depression. It's also used for chronic pain and PTSD.
I have seen that. I think I've seen posted about it.
So the FDA just approved it for the nasal spray because it's one molecule different than ketamine. But when you get these ketamine infusions, which they are, they're about an hour and a half long. You have a bag just like an IV, and it drips into like any infusion would. And so I was experiencing, and I'll just say right now that like I'm going to be mentioning suicidal ideation. So if that's triggering for you, like fast forward.
No, you're good.
But okay. So I was in December. I had been depressed for maybe 6 weeks to 2 months. Like it was my longest depressive episode since high school.
Okay.
And it was the worst that my husband had ever seen me, and my mom even said that it was the worst that she had ever seen me. And since I moved out of my parents' house, I've had more manic episodes than depressive episodes. So my mom has definitely seen me at my worst when I've been depressed.
So real quick, I'm going to stop you for a second. I met you sometime in fall, so you were probably going through a depressed episode then. I would have had no idea. No clue.
Yeah.
Couldn't even tell.
That goes back to what we were saying about becoming an actor, turning out that flawless performance.
Mm-hmm.
So, it was about a week before Christmas, and my mom had come to a therapy session with me. She came into town because she had been so scared for me based on what I had been texting her, based on what my husband had been texting her. That she was really afraid that I was going to take my life. And I honestly did have a plan and the means to kill myself. I had planned to do it on December 21st, and I was all set to do it. I knew I wouldn't make it through Christmas, and I hid this from everyone. Nobody really realized it until it got to a point where I was barely functioning. And after that therapy appointment, my mom called. There's actually a ketamine clinic in Pittsburgh, Pittsburgh Ketamine, Dr. Miller, who is a saint. He's wonderful. His wife is wonderful. Everyone in the office is just, puts you at ease. So when we called, they told us that they didn't have an opening until the 28th. And I laughed and sobbing because I knew, I wasn't going to make it till then.
Uh-huh.
And then about seconds after, the woman on the phone said, "Hold on. The person that just called a few minutes before you canceled his appointments for next week. Can you make it the 18th, 19th, and 20th? And so or the 19th, 20th, and 21st, whatever it was. So I was very literally saved. When I had my first treatment, I went home that night and I started to try and think of, not try and think of suicidal thoughts, but I just, didn't bother to get them out of my head.
Mm-hmm.
But every time I would think of suicidal thought, it was like there was an electric fence in my brain that was just not letting that suicidal thought come into my head, not letting me focus on that, not letting me think that. And it's amazing if you do the research and look into it, the way ketamine rewires the pathways in your brain, and just, it's given me, I've been able to go back to work full time, which I haven't been able to do for the past year and a half. And I feel like I'm managing it well. I feel like my relationships are better than ever with everyone in my life. And I feel like I'm able to honor my commitments more. And the best part is I actually want to live. And I've never in my life been able to say that before. My first suicide attempt was when I was 11. And so I have been struggling for a long time, and to feel this way,
it's like a blessing. It's like a new life.
Yeah, we joke and say it was our Christmas miracle, but it really is a new life. It's I have new ways of thinking, new ways of understanding that I didn't have before. So I have the way I like to phrase it is I have great respect for ketamine. Obviously, people abuse it,
mm-hmm.
And I don't, I can't really say anything about that other than, like, please get some help.
Yeah.
But to have the medical experience that I had with ketamine, medically supervised, very, clinical, everything was explained to me. That was just a complete life changer, life saver.
How often do you go in for treatment?
So I had 6 treatments up front. It was 3 days on, 4 days off, 3 days on. And after that, they just recommend that you come in for a booster every time you feel like you've been down for more than a few days. So they recommend that you log your mood, and they give you access to a kind of app sort of thing to do that, and they can see it so they can keep track of your mood.
That's awesome.
Oh, yeah. I haven't set it up yet just because I have a different mood tracking app that I like, but I still should. What's the harm in tracking your mood twice?
Yeah.
So it's the other thing. So you just go back for a booster whenever you start to feel yourself slipping into depression again, and it's just, my understanding is it's just one treatment, so like 1 hour to 1.5 hours, and then you just continue to live your life until you need another booster. Unfortunately, the treatments are very expensive, and I was very lucky that I had help in being able to achieve this point in my mental health recovery. But it's worth it. It's so worth it. It's so worth it.
So I didn't make a financial, well, I did actually. So for me, I mean, I went to the hospital twice at the end of last year, and in between going to the hospital twice, I went to stay with my parents in Florida because that's where they live now. So that was just the only outlet I had to go to, but I knew I needed rest, and I needed to stay with people that were going to support me 100%. But like the same thing with ketamine, like for you doing that was, it was expensive, but it was so worth it. For me, going to Florida was expensive as far as like I had to leave my life. I left the job that I had that I really liked. I had to leave a lot of things, but I got to the same point where I actually want to live again. Like I was the same. I mean, I don't think I had my first suicidal thought until I was 16 or 17. But I mean, that's 10 to 12 years. I went every day with kind of like, and not that I thought about it all day, every day, but definitely like a lot of days thinking, is this life worth living? I was just so tired. I was so tired.
Oh, yeah. Because it's not, especially with bipolar disorder, it's not just the fatigue you would normally get with depression, but the strain you put on yourself when you're manic, and the worry you have about the consequences, that is so draining.
Yes, it's like it's just, I got to the point where I was so exhausted. I was just so tired. I just didn't think I could live another day. I was just so tired.
Well, I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad that you feel like living again.
I'm glad for you as well. Well, we both got our Christmas blessings this year.
Yes.
So how do you tie yoga into all of this? Do you think yoga helps with managing your diagnosis?
Oh, absolutely. So, I am actually also trained through the Veterans Yoga Project. It's, I believe, I can go look at my certificate to be sure, but it's, I believe, called Mindful Resilience and Trauma Recovery Teacher Training. So, I am trained to teach trauma-informed yoga. I also keep in touch with, I've gone to several trainings that teach about trauma-informed yoga, and the differences can be very subtle, which is, in my eyes, brilliant, because now at this point I teach every yoga class as if it were trauma-informed.
Okay.
Because so many people have experienced trauma without ever saying anything, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And they kind of teach you that when you work with kids and teenagers too, especially like in a residential setting or court mandated setting, is to just assume that the child has experienced trauma and not, touch or, not really,
just be very sensitive.
Just like to be mindful, yeah. To be mindful of how you're interacting with kids and teens, and really anyone. So, I have learned a lot of different ways that yoga can manage trauma and negative emotions. And I have definitely applied that to my coping routine. Sometimes my friend has to check in with me and be like, have you done yoga today?
Yeah.
And, my practice isn't by any means like my goal practice. I don't get a chance to do yoga every day. Maybe I get a chance to do my, 3 poses a day, or I get a chance to do a headstand practice or a handstand practice. But, I'm not spending an hour and a half every day doing the Ashtanga primary series, even though I'd love to. I just, realistically, that would take up such a big portion of my day that I just don't have the time for.
But little things, as long as you're doing little things, like I try to move for like 30 minutes a day. That's my goal at least. But if I can't do that, like if I do 5 minutes, at least I moved today.
Yeah, and honestly, the other thing that I keep in mind too is living your practice off the mat. So there's actually 8 limbs of yoga, and asana, or the physical movement part, is only 1 limb. So there's 7 other limbs of yoga that do not involve the physical movement of your body. So you can do yoga by chanting. That's bhakti yoga, devotion yoga. You can do yoga by practicing ahimsa, which is one of the ethics. And ahimsa is not harming, and that goes for other people, other beings, and for yourself.
Okay. That's awesome. So really, you can practice yoga even if you're not physically doing it. There are just so many ways that you can practice it.
Right, and if you learn, breath techniques, that's pranayama, which is a part of yoga. So, and even just, tuning in, being mindful, that's kind of your brain doing some yoga.
Yes, absolutely. I try to do that also every day, even if it's just 5 minutes. I'll try to like meditate or be mindful just for like 5 minutes to bring me back and ground me. Even if I get it last minute of the day right before bed, as long as I'm doing a little bit of it. I think that's important. Just implementing a little bit of these things to your almost every single day is huge for mental health.
Absolutely.
So, do you tie therapy and yoga together?
So I am at a new job right now, and I started about 6 weeks ago. I haven't broached the topic with my supervisor yet about incorporating yoga into my therapy practice at this agency. But I plan to, and in the past I have used yoga as a therapeutic tool. I specialize in working with kids and adolescents, and in, as you may guess, working with more. And I have in the past been able to incorporate yoga with kids and teenagers by, just making that mind-body connection. We would start with, progressive muscle relaxation, tensing up and relaxing your entire body one part at a time. And then, talk about, different emotions. How do you feel this in your body? How do you feel sadness in your body? How do you feel anger in your body? And sometimes they don't know. So we'll talk while I move them through some yoga poses, just simple, anything age appropriate. The really great part about my training is that we learn a lot about anatomy. So it's really important to make sure that if you are teaching yoga to kids and teenagers, that you're doing things that are developmentally appropriate, because, their small bodies can't do certain things or are going to struggle with certain things, but there are other things that they can do so much easier than adults. So just keeping in mind the limitations both physically and emotionally. And usually I would use yoga kind of as a tool because kids talk more and open up more when, at least I find this to be true, when they're doing something else. So when they're drawing and doing art therapy, or when they're doing play therapy, playing a game, they're more like to talk about what's going on in their life if you're not making eye contact, if you're not, sitting across from each other, if you're, engaging them in some other way. And I have read specific studies on art therapy. I haven't looked into it much with play therapy, and there's not a lot of data on yoga therapy because it's fairly new. It's not evidence-based. I would love to be a part of any research that's going on. So if any researchers are listening to this and want to hire, just saying. So I just love to use it as a tool. But the study I had read, sorry, getting back to that, it's specifically about art therapy, is when you're doing something like tactile or a motor, something with your motor system, your motor skills, you're more engaged with that activity, which frees up your working memory to help kind of loosen up some associations you might make, some triggers you might have noticed that you might not be able to pinpoint if you're just sitting in a chair making eye contact with a therapist. But if you're doing make your own Play-Doh or make your own stress ball activity, you might be able to notice, like, oh, hey, I got really upset at school today because I didn't eat breakfast. Little things like that,
Yes.
just making connections.
Awesome. So you work with kids, and you said you were diagnosed when you were, 13?
14. So I started treatment when I was 13. I was misdiagnosed for the first year and a half of my treatment. And then I finally, back when I was going through all of this, they didn't diagnose bipolar disorder until you turn 18, which is drastically different from these days where every kid is getting diagnosed with bipolar. And I won't even get on my soapbox about that. But so I was diagnosed when I had my first manic episode, which included psychosis, and that was my second hospitalization. In total, I've been in the hospital 4 times.
Okay.
As an adolescent and twice as an adult. And when I had this psychotic episode, my psychiatrist, who I currently see now, the one I drive up to Erie for, she got the diagnosis correct, started treating me for bipolar disorder, but the diagnosis she put was mood disorder NOS, which means not otherwise specified, because she knew it was more than depression, but, at that time...
She couldn't diagnose you until you were 18.
Yeah, and I was only 14 or 15 at that time, so we had another 3 years to wait it out before she was like, here it is.
So, in your opinion, like going through this yourself and then also being a therapist, it's like never too early to take your child either to a yoga class or to therapy.
I would agree with that, yes. Especially for yoga. I think for therapy sometimes, so the agency I work for now starts treating kids at age 5.
Okay.
I think there's value in kids younger than that, seeking therapy as well, especially if there's been any, sort of disruption in the household, or if they're acting out in school or showing signs of being traumatized. Those are good ways to bring kids into therapy. Also, kids who have a parent who, might have a serious mental illness, or a parent who's incarcerated, or a parent who's an addict or recovering addict, then I think it's also important to get kids into therapy in those cases young, to also... I think the other perk of getting kids into therapy young is to destigmatize it for the rest of their lives,
So they're not embarrassed. I used to be so embarrassed of therapy. I refused to go. My mom tried to get me in high school, and I refused because I was so embarrassed.
Yeah, and it's such a real stigma, and especially, it's... The interesting part is some of the kids I see, like, do not want anyone to know they're in therapy. The other kids I see say it's the best part of their week, which, you can take that in multiple ways, but...
I definitely want Annalise to know that she, like, I'm not certain if I'm going to take her to therapy just as a precaution because of what my diagnosis is. I probably will. And just because therapy can't hurt. But also, I want her to know that it's okay and not to be embarrassed of it.
And I think that's a really great choice as a parent. I'm not a parent, so I can't really speak for anything like that, but I think that's a really great choice.
Yeah. So, if someone is kind of going through this, what are then maybe they're in therapy, maybe they're not. What are like some coping mechanisms that you would recommend?
Ooh, that's a big question.
Like little things that they can do. Just maybe one or two little things they can do every day to help.
Okay. Yeah, so my number one tip is to add a self-care item to your to-do list. I tell this to everyone I speak to, not every client, but, the clients who I think are ready for it, for a daily routine. Just, if you're writing a to-do list for yourself, or, have any inclination to keep track of what you're doing. To-do lists aren't for everyone. If you don't like to-do lists, try doing a to-done list. That's when you write down all the things you accomplished that day, cross them all off, and then, add something to your skill, or to your list that's, for you. So that could be anything from, relaxing with your spouse or partner, to drinking tea, to taking a walk. Something as simple as like laying with your legs up the wall, which will add that the benefits of putting your legs up the wall and laying on the ground, if anyone is picturing this, that doing 10 minutes of that can equate to a 20 nap.
Oh,
which
nice.
is pretty, yeah. So, so I would say do something for yourself on your to-do list. So a self-care item, and even if that's take a shower or eat breakfast, those are self-care items too. Like taking care of yourself in really practical ways is still taking care of yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I guess the second tip I would give is a mindfulness exercise, which is geared to help you come off autopilot. Because when I was learning mindfulness counseling, I was given the example of, if you drive somewhere and you don't remember getting there, like how many times does that happen to you?
Constantly.
Yeah. So it's like you have to come off autopilot in order to pay. So my challenge to everyone is to take a moment before or after your day starts or ends, and just use your five senses wherever you are, whatever you're doing. If you're at dinner, if you're sitting and relaxing, if you're at work, just use your five senses. Notice, look around, notice what you see. Listen, notice what you hear. Smell anything that's in the air. Maybe, and if you can't smell anything, then maybe it's just fresh air or warm air. Touch things. Touch what's around you.
So just taking in the simple things.
Yeah, taste something, whether it be water or a mint or your lunch at work. Just try to pause. Use your five senses. I promise it doesn't take it takes less than a minute to do this. And it's a way to come off autopilot. And then I have one more. Is that okay?
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, so my last suggestion that I'm going to make is to have a threshold activity. So what this means is every time you enter the door or step out of the shower or get out of bed, so like you're using a pairing strategy. So every time you walk through the door, you're going to think of something you're grateful for. Or every time you step out of the shower, you're going to take 5 deep breaths. Just pairing something with something you already do can make a huge difference.
I love that. I think that is a great tip, and I'm going to start including that. I do write what I'm grateful for in the morning, and I'll try to, just say thank you for things throughout the day, but I like that, just adding that to something that you already do, so it's consistent and it's constant.
Yes, and that's the idea. And then the other perk of that is if you have other people in your household, they might catch on to it too and start doing it too.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. So, is there anything else that I should have asked you that I didn't?
I can't think of anything. I think we covered a lot.
Yeah, this was great. Thank you so much for being here with me. I appreciate it. I love that you are so honest about everything and open, and I really think that this can give people a view into something that they might not understand.
Well, I really hope that's the case, and thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed talking with you, and I hope this reaches some people that need to hear it.
Me too, definitely. So, thank you, and we will talk to you again soon.
Sounds great. I look forward to it.